Miranda, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Really delighted and thrilled to have you on the show.
So excited to be here, Brendan. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I loved your keynote whenever we met for the first time in Croatia at the Baby Bathwater event last summer. And we had some great conversations outside of that. So I'm really excited to bring your journey to our listeners. They're going to learn so much today. So as you know, and we're very aligned on this, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So Miranda, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
At my core, I just believe that small business makes the world go round.
Yes.
Right? And I am unabashedly addicted to the fire and passion and that light in people's eyes when they're leaning into the thing that they're passionate in the world around. And for me, the more that we can connect people to do the thing that they're here to do and support them on the business side, to be able to grow beautiful, sustainable, valuable companies that serve not just the founder with that vision in their eye of what it is that they want to do, but build and grow incredible teams where people can do good work and grow their careers, serving communities and customers, the partners, and everyone along the way. I think that is a beautiful model, and sometimes we get it wrong, and sometimes it goes awry, and sometimes we're growing things while taking away from teams, customers, environment, communities. But when we get it all in balance, I think it's beautiful, and it's a worthy cause to serve.
Oh, you are singing my song, Miranda. That is that's what lights me up. That's our own purpose, and I love it. Like 99% of businesses by volume are small to medium-sized enterprises. They form the very fabric of our society. They touch every corner of it, and the work we do, I know what you're doing at your end of the world in Canada, and what we're doing at this end of the world is helping in some small way to support those wonderful SME leaders to scale with purpose. You have, in your words, what you just cited to me, I mean, you created a beautiful, sustainable, valuable company, which became a little bit more than an SME. You created an incredible unicorn, leading it to a $1 billion valuation on IPO, more than 3 years ago now. And I would love you today to kind of get under the bonnet of that, because it's every entrepreneur's dream to scale their business. I think very few ever dream of, maybe few dream, but very few will ever realize a $1 billion valuation. Can you share a little bit, before we get into the Thinkific story and understand kind of what made that work? Can you share a little bit of your own entrepreneurial journey, the abridged version? How do you arrive at the point where actually you're ringing the bell on IPO day on a $1 billion valuation?
Yeah, and yes, abridged version. Like I was the daughter of farmers and entrepreneurs, and so growing up, my role models were all beekeepers on one side and farmers on the other, which really just means it's all on you, and you roll up your sleeves and you put in a hard day's work, and you go to bed and you get up in the morning and you do it again. And nobody's going to come and save you, and yes, you've got community, and yes, you're going to support there, but really you make your life is what you make it. I was then exposed, thankfully, at a really young age to technology. My dad actually, at one point, was not going to take over the family beekeeping business, and he went and got a computer science degree between 1988 and 1992. So when I was 8 to 12 years old. And that meant that for me, I was on the internet before most people had any idea what the internet was. I had a computer in my house before most people even had one at work, that kind of thing. And that gave me that early exposure to technology which has always been a deep passion of mine.
Yeah.
So sort of fast forward, it's sort of no surprise that I fell into small business. I had, the lemonade stand at the end of my driveway when nobody was driving down my dirt road as a kid. But later on, I did web design and I did in-home computer repair, and later on started to support my husband with his photography business and built him a company. But all of that was really around how do we tech enable and combine technology with small business. And fast forward, it's sort of no surprise with that lens how I landed into the world of Thinkific. Before Thinkific, when we had our photography studio, I love supporting on the photography side and building that, but much more, I love helping other people build and grow their businesses. And so I was often speaking and teaching and building community in that sort of photography and event space. And people would often say to me, it's like, oh my gosh, like you should be a consultant. Like you should, like, this is what you should do. And this may resonate with you, but here's the reality with small business and consultants. Small businesses do not know that they need consultants, number one. Number two, small businesses cannot afford consultants. Every dollar really needs to pull its weight, and it's really hard to pull a dollar aside for consulting. And number three, even when we get past those two hurdles, small business owners only have two hands. And that means that they can only implement a tiny fraction of all of the things that they know that they should be doing for their business. And so that was really the foundation upon which Thinkific and my involvement in Thinkific began.
That's wonderful. It's that classic kind of wholesome story of the young kids at the end of the road selling lemonade, and they fast forward and they turn into the leader of this $1 billion unicorn. The journey into Thinkific, then, for our listeners, if you can just share a little bit of the backstory of kind of what were the origins of Thinkific, who did it serve, a little bit about the business model, and then we'll get under the hood of, I suppose for us, it's trying to ascertain why it became, what are the principles that undergirded Thinkific's success?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I was involved in Thinkific, so my co-founder, Greg Smith, current CEO and original founder, he was teaching LSAT, which is the law school admission testing classes. He's a former corporate security lawyer, and so he was teaching LSAT classes out at University of British Columbia, and he would schlep out there, in the early 2000s, with his pile of papers and so on and so forth, and teach in a classroom setting. And was sort of looking around and going, it's like we don't need to be here, and my students are not just here. And the first thing that he did was he actually took that content and he started to put it on a blog to get it online. And then his brother, Matt, who was a software engineer, sort of offered to help. And so the very, very first seed of what Thinkific would eventually be was really about an entrepreneur solving their own problem, which is, I've got this course content, I want it to reach a wider audience. There's no reason why this needs to be done in person. And can we deliver this a different way? And so that's what they started to do. And they mashed together, like some still do now, unfortunately. Look at the WordPress and the plugins and the various things to try to make something that worked. And when they did that, they were surprised, certainly that started to have a little bit of traction. They were actually able to enroll students and start to build a bit of an online business. But more importantly, they had people coming to them saying, I also teach, or I want to teach. Can you help me take what I do and put it online? And that was really that seed of, is this a solution, or is there an opportunity here to serve in a bigger way? And so they played around with that for a while. When when I met them, so fast forward a little bit, they had been building software for a couple of years, but the original business model looked quite a bit different. And so they were actually producing course content for big, like professional development kind of courses. So like the Human Resources Management Association or the Alberta Forestry Professionals, anyone that had sort of ongoing continuing ed credit requirements. So they were actually producing course content for them. And at that time they had to do a lot of the work manually to get somebody set up, but there was a tech-enabled back end. When I met Greg, he had found me in Angel List, which is a sort of a social network for really nerdy tech people who maybe are looking for early teams. And we met in a coffee shop where I think I grilled him more than he grilled me. I was bored, to be honest. I was trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do next. And I saw in what they were building the potential to serve the audience that I cared about, which was small businesses, in a way that was accessible and inexpensive, frankly, in a way that could give them the extra set of hands and could give them guidance. Because, if you could build software in a certain way, you can guide people to build in a particular way. And so that was sort of the seed of how I came to join. When I joined, I was the fourth co-founder, and when I joined, we had sort of very early software, but we were not yet a SaaS company and not yet focused on small business. So you couldn't sign up and do anything without talking to us. You certainly couldn't pay us without talking to us. You wouldn't have a complete understanding of what the software did, but the foundations of the software were there, and we shortly thereafter really launched as a SaaS product that you could sign up and get going on your own.
So just give us some details here in terms of the year, how many team members you were the fourth co-founder, what were the revenues at this stage, how many customers roughly, and kind of in what geographic regions?
Yeah, great question. So I joined in 2014. We were incorporated in 2012. So I think I joined 18 months or something after incorporation, something like that. At the time that I joined, we had very little recurring revenue. We had a tiny bit of services revenue because at that point the model was different. And so, as I said, we were actually producing course content for people. So there was a little bit of services revenue, but we're talking like double digits accounts, and I think most of the accounts were our test accounts on the system. So it was it was very, very early, but it could sort of see, at least for me at the time, I couldn't have predicted where we have taken it to. But for me at the time, it was an interesting solution to the problem that I cared about, and enough meet there to say, you know what, this is worth working on for a while. Let's go heads down and see what this could be.
So what I'm hearing, you were attracted by the purpose, whether they had articulated that or not. Clearly the why was strong in the context of problem solving, bringing a proposition, a value addition to a community you care deeply about, and there was enough creativity left in terms of the business model and what you could bring to this in the context of actually then thinking that actually this could be something. There's something in this. It's worth sticking around with Greg and the guys here for a little while longer.
Yeah, it was just it was all potential at that point for sure. But it was fun. And like I said, I just happened to be at a point where I was itching for a project and something to dive into. And I saw this as being able to serve that small business community in an outsized way.
So, In 7 years, you took this. Would it have been delivering like less than $1 million revenue whenever you joined in 2012? Am I less than $100,000?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no. Like I don't even know that we were paying like our hosting costs at that point.
Wow.
Like, technically, we were making some money, but this was very, very, very early.
Sure. So in 7 years, then, if you reflect back and look at some of the key inflection points along the way, first of all, we talk about, and it's straight out of the Marshall Goldsmith's book, what got you here won't get you to there. What were those points when you realized, actually, look, we can't exist like the way we're existing. We can't communicate like the way we're communicating. We're not a scrappy startup anymore. We're now kind of something different, and we need to explore what systems look like. We need to build out teams. At what point along the journey were those key inflection points? Can you share that with our listeners, so that, I suppose, what I'm keen to do is for you to call these out, because everyone listening will be at different points in their journey, and it's to give them kind of visibility over where they're likely are and what's likely to come up, and what they can do to short circuit some of the challenges before they kind of reach the traumatic stage of having to change, but actually enacting the change before it's required.
I'm glad that you asked the question that way, and I want to kind of I'm going to go up a level and kind of give a bit of a description, and then we can get into the specifics of Thinkific, because and I know that you and I have talked about this before, but this stage of scaling is so fascinating to me, and it is so unique when, we've got lots and lots of resources out there on how to start a business, and, you can find lots of people who've started businesses, unfortunately. And we know that there's lots and lots of businesses out there that are operating what I would say at scale. And most people, especially anybody that works in a large company, has only ever experienced working for an at-scale company. But this journey from how do you go from being a small company to how do you go to being an at-scale company is such a unique stage. And so few people have actually managed that transition. Even the people that have been at a company through that transition have usually been further down, where they're not having to think about how are we managing these two energies simultaneously within our company. And so let me sort of explain that a little bit, or how I see that. So, when we think about the startup, sort of that like brand new company, we're thinking founder energy, we're thinking 0 to 1, we're thinking hustle, we're thinking move fast and break things, we're thinking it's like try it and we'll figure it out, experiment, fail, learn, pivot fast, change fast, all of that very chaos hustle energy. And then if we flip to thinking of what does at scale look like, we see, more about, like how are we forecasting? Like what are the predictable, reliable drum beats in our organization? How are we creating stability, processes and playbooks, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that one of the sort of fallacies and what actually trips up a lot of people in navigating this in between is this almost like idea of like one day where it's like, oh, we need to grow up. Like we need to flip the switch. We need to not be move fast and break things, builder, pioneer, founder, hustle energy. We need to grow up, and we need to be stable and really sort of operate and optimize focused. But like anything, it's actually a transition. And what that means is where at the beginning of our company, 100% of the company's energy is going into, I call it builder pioneer. So it's
I love that. I love that term.
Into that builder pioneer. And if we know that at scale, let's say 99 or 98% of that energy is in that sort of operate and optimize, is there's no point where it flips in between, but it's actually continually changing in between. So at any given point in scale, there is a different ratio and a constantly changing ratio of how much of our company's collective energy is going into that builder pioneer sort of mindset, and how much of our energy is going into that operate and optimize mindset. And how are those two mixing? How are they clashing? Because they're totally different energies. And once you, like, when you just think that you've got a handle on it, things continue to shift, because it's an evolution from one to the other.
I love this. We were speaking amongst our own team yesterday, and there is such strong focus, and especially in this side of the world, and similarly so in North America and Canada, and on these startups. And there's a kind of a sexy newness around that whole startup community and that whole startup vibe. And then you've got the likes of the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Teslas, and they command all of the headlines. But in between, and we called this out yesterday, you've got almost this invisible middle of the SMEs who are actually, we called it out at the start, who make up the fabric of our society, but they're forgotten about. And this kind of transition from the builder energy to optimizing, I'm keen to take our listeners on that journey, to call out some of the challenges along the way, because what we want to understand is that kind of it's moving from that explore phase in the early stage where you're building, you're breaking, you're building, you're breaking, you're iterating, you're refining, you're throwing some stuff out, you're adding some stuff in, to get to the point where you say, stop, put that in a glass case, and now we must exploit all of the builder energy now in this optimization phase to bring this product, this defined product, to a wider audience. That's me narrating and kind of recapping on what I'm hearing, Miranda. If you take us on that, I've got this visual kind of stopping this kind of builder phase and starting to transition into the optimization phase. What were some of the challenges along the way for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's never-ending challenges at every stage. But I think that, let me step into that. So first of all, I think that the way that I think about it is, we're ideating, we're building, as you just said, it's like, we're like, try this. And what we're really trying to do, if we think about what is the company doing overall, is we're really creating a machine that translates, or that exchanges value for money, right? So it's like, how do we create a machine that produces something of value, whether it's products, services, some combination of the two? We're producing something of value, and we are going to exchange it for money. And so in as much as our machine is doing that, we know that we get to live another day. And ideally, we're doing that in a way that actually makes us more money than it costs us to produce the thing of value. And we're probably building some stuff for future, and so on and so forth. But that's really what we're trying to do. And so maybe I'll sort of frame this a little bit through some of the missteps that I see people doing, and even certainly some of the missteps that we made. And one of those is continuing with that sort of builder pioneer energy in areas that, as you said, should be put in a glass case, and we should stop touching them, because that builder pioneer sort of founder energy is really amazing at 0 to 1 and building shit that doesn't exist already. But it can be really terrible where we try to innovate on all sorts of things that we do not need to innovate on in our company. And so, because that's the mindset. And so when I think early on, a couple of examples where that particular lesson was learned, comically, when we first raised financing. So we were actually bootstrapped for a pretty decent amount of time. We signed our first term sheet. for just over $500,000 in October 2015. So that's 3.5 years into the life of our company. We didn't actually end up putting the money in our account until March 2016, and I'm going to come back to that because that was an interesting bit of a story. But we were one of the first, or possibly actually, I think we were the first investment of a new VC group who we love to this day, Rhino Ventures, but they were former founders themselves. And we all had it in our mind that we were going to do investment differently. And so we were not going to use basically standard paperwork. We were going to invent the really innovative founder and investor friendly way of doing this.
Get rid of all the legal jargon and let's do this in the back of a napkin.
Anyways, it's comical in retrospect that we're like, no, like we're gonna, not only are we going to innovate where we're actually creating value to customers, but let's also innovate in how in investment financing is done in venture capital. And so needless to say, that was a lesson learned for all of us, because it ended up taking 5 months to go from term sheet to actually closing that deal, because we were trying to be very novel and creative. And years later, we needed to undo all of that paperwork because these were totally non-standard terms, etc. And in order to actually do the IPO and get closer to that, bring on other investors, we needed to clean up all of our paperwork. And so that was one of those early examples of it's like innovate when it is creating strategic advantage with what you're doing for customers. Do not innovate on the things that you do not need to be creative about. We do not need to be creative about how we do financing. And there's lots of other things in our business that we probably don't need to be creative about, especially when it comes to things like just like accounting in generally, like unless we're actually like in fintech and trying to revolutionize how we do that. This is an area of the business that we do not need builder, pioneer, creative energy. This is an area where it's like, actually, let's just go get something off the shelf that does this really well, and set that as one of those things in a glass case that we're not going to innovate on, so that we can invest our innovation energy where it matters for our customers.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And given your role as COO, how did you manage I suppose some of the creative friction that typically happens between the builders and the optimizers? Where you want to come in and kind of say, Greg, guys, leave this alone. We now need to put a process in place to systemize this, and almost, this is kryptonite to entrepreneurs when you start talking about processes and systems. It's almost, don't kill my creative energy. How did you manage kind of that friction? I'm saying friction. Maybe there wasn't any. Maybe it was a beautiful transition, and they wanted processes and systems. But
But also, yes, I was COO, but I would say that I fall more on the builder pioneer side.
You were implicit on this.
Side, but I can at least understand and speak both languages. And so I'm closer to center than some of my very visionary counterparts. And that gave me, I think, that the ideal skill set and frame to be able to navigate that stage. And one of the biggest things here is just the recognition that we need to minimize the number of things that we're trying to push forward, because if we're trying to push forward 20 things at a time, 6 months later, you've got 20 things that are a little bit further in process, but very few things that are done. And so another way to frame that, I love using the example of Warren Buffett's two-list rule. And so Warren Buffett is famous for saying that, when you're thinking about productivity and task completion, you make a list of your to-do list of your top 25 things to do, and you stack rank them in order of priority. And then you draw a hard black line after 5 or 3 or 4 or whatever the very small number is. And you now have 2 lists. You have your, this is what we're working on list, and you have our do not touch at any cost list. Because otherwise, like I said, 6 months later, you've got 25 things that are all maybe a little bit further along, but nothing has been completed. And we only get value from the things that cross the finish line. And it's the same within our company and that innovation energy, which is we can't be pushing everything forward all the time or nothing is crossing the finish line. And we only get credit. We only get, the customers once we're past that. We only get the value of that new product release and the increase in average revenue per customer, or whatever the outcomes that we're trying to drive once we get those projects past the finish line. And so that requires a constant game. It's like whack-a-mole, where it's like, okay, we know that these things aren't quite ready yet. They're not like, this is not the process or the system that's going to hold us for 5 years, but can this hold us for 3 months? We're not going to touch our hiring process for 3 months. It's good enough. We're going to set it, forget it. We're going to wrap it in a bow. Like, yes, we know that it's going to fall down when we increase volumes, or yes, we know that, it doesn't meet these other requirements. But when we look at all of the priorities we have, let's get clear about what are the most important things to complete in this next quarter, 2 quarters, whatever the period of time that we're looking at is. And let's get all of our focus on pushing those things across the finish line. While these other things, they're not going to last forever, but they'll hold us. And so that's kind of that balance for me of, we're going to put a pause in that. We're going to put it in the glass case so that we can focus over here.
What I'm hearing is, the main thing is to keep the main thing, getting
Yes.
clarity in what is the main thing, or those 1 or 2 things, and getting alignment and agreement on that, and ensuring that the energy, the combined energy within the business is focused on those main things. The cadence then you referred to of that kind of review, you mentioned, sitting down on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, reviewing that list of things, the 20 list, and kind of highlighting the top 3. Can you give us, can you share with the listeners the importance of that,
Yes.
of that coming together to get aligned on the main thing, and what did that cadence look like within Thinkific?
Yeah, I like to think about, in building our business, whether it's at the macro level or the micro level, basically we're building things and then we're running things. So we're building a system, a channel, a method, a product, and then we're going to set that into so it's living in the builder pioneer energy over here. But then once we've built it, we've set it, we've designed it, what have you, then it goes to the operate and optimize. And so then it's running. And I think that makes sense, right? So it's like, we're going to build a blog. So that's all the chaos energy. We build the blog, but now we've got a blog and now it's running it. So now it's now it becomes one of these layers of success in our business. And it took us, I think, a little while to realize that we were investing too much of our innovation energy on sort of the how to run a company, when the reality is you need to figure out what the model or the method you're going to use is. And I don't think that there's one right model. I don't care if it's EOS. I don't care if it's, if it's scaling up. I don't care if it's just some
simple scaling, Scale X framework.
Your framework. Yeah. I don't care what the framework is. I care that there is a framework, because then that becomes one of those operate and optimize rhythms of the business, where we now don't need to invest a bunch of energy to be oh, wait, goal setting. What are we doing with that again? And we're now all of a sudden we're getting distracted because we're trying to reinvent the wheel. What matters is that we have reliable, predictable rhythms and drum beats in our business that ensure that we are keeping our team aligned around what are we doing? How are we doing it? And on a longer term and then shorter and then near term basis, right? And so we need to have some process of alignment around where are we going? Mission, vision, the BHAG, what is the very long-term goal? How are we going to achieve that in 3 years? How are we going to achieve that in 1 year? And what does that look like for this quarter? And then within quarter, are we on track for this quarter? And having that system so that it goes onto autopilot. What we want is for this to just be a habit in our business, the way when we wake up, we brush our teeth and we have a shower and we brush our hair, where all the things are, where we don't have to think about it, because that's what just ensures that at the very least, even when things are chaotic and things are moving really quickly and so on and so forth, is at the very least, we know that our teams are clear on where are we trying to go in this period of time, how are we tracking towards that, and we have those rhythms built in so we can catch when we're off track or when something needs adjustment, and we continue to build towards the goal.
Yeah, there's something really powerful in that, isn't there? That kind of almost safety, and it's psychological in many respects, in routine, where regardless of how chaotic it will get out, it will be out there. Well, we're going to sit down, we're going to open up every week with our weekly meeting, with our Monday morning check-in. We're going to end every week with a celebration, examine those wins. Every month we're going to sit down and we're going to check in on our OKRs or whatever it may be, your KPIs. Every quarter we're going to reset those. Every 6 months we're going to bring the team together. If you've got that kind of cadence and rhythm and heartbeat in the business, regardless, there is a level of safety psychologically, I feel, just as you're saying that, in that. I'd never kind of thought of it that way, in terms of that psychological safety in the routine and the rhythm.
It's grounding.
It is grounding is the word. Yeah, I love that. And people then, when you start to bring the team round, there's a level of predictability in the way you're leading that doesn't then disrupt their energy to think, oh shit, what way is Miranda going to be today? I wonder, will we have our meeting or not? Are we setting OKRs this month or this quarter or not? Or, some quarters we do it, some, and all of a sudden that then consumes energy that should otherwise be expended on actually developing the value proposition and delivering and serving your customers in a wonderful way. I'm keen to kind of explore any other kind of challenges. Maybe actually, when you now kind of look back and reflect back, are there key moments you feel? And I know there's always a danger when you reflect back and kind of write the story you want, you almost feel compelled to say, but are there pivotal moments when you arrived at a place where you go, my goodness, this could really be something? Or did you believe that at the outset? Can you share a little bit about your kind of reflections now, looking back?
Yeah. That is a funny one. No, I mean, do you ever at the beginning think oh, this one day could do this? Not any more than you might daydream about winning the lottery or anything else like that. But I think that there's a number of very specific points, and it was always around when we would do retreats or bring the team together. We sort of were doing retreats, let's say once, maybe twice a year, where we would do an offsite or sort of a weekend away. And there was, and I remember a bunch of different years, and it was always Greg and I, so my co-founder and I, there'd be a moment at a party, or once we were on a boat, or once we were walking back from, one thing to the other, where the moment feels sort of frozen in time, where we're looking around and we're seeing our team, and it's always outside of work, right? So it's people are just celebrating, and our team to this day, so many people have, created just lifelong best friends, and our team is very, very close. And looking around and going whoa, this is working. This is working, and we are doing good, and this feels so good. And those moments weren't about dreaming about what could yet be. And we'd had conversations of well, one day, maybe we could IPO, one day, but it didn't feel tangible. And it should have been much further off than it was, if it wasn't for outside forces. But really stopping to take stock of what we had built and had created. Yeah, it wasn't all the time. I don't think you can live there, but certainly those moments I think are important, even as a founder, to sort of stop and actually celebrate and go, you know what, like, this is good. Like, we're doing great work for customers that we care about, and we're building and growing careers of an incredible team.
You've mentioned team quite a lot, and I know you guys were revered for your culture and indeed won many awards as a result of the culture that you created. Can you share with our listeners what were the ingredients to that? How did you bake the culture that you baked? Because I'm always drawn to the Zig Ziglar quote, and you know, when I chat about culture and I chat about the importance of developing people, attracting brilliant people in, and developing those people and getting them inspired behind a wonderful purpose and aligned to a vision, and that you don't build businesses, you build people, and people build businesses. And you guys did that incredibly well. Let's get in kind of to what was in the recipe bowl there.
Yeah, you know what? I'd love to be able to say that, oh, this was very intentionally curated and crafted from early, Stripe, blah, 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 blah. But when I reflect back, because I've had that question a lot of times, fundamentally, we started building good culture before it was intentional. Later on, it was much more intentional. But early on, we just treated our team the way that we wanted to be treated. And that sounds so cliche, and yet it was so atypical. When we're all entrepreneurs because, frankly, I mean, because we don't like to be told what to do. We like to be able to like do what we think we should do, and get curious and creative and just focus on the work. But that also meant that we had lives. Like, I had a little kid at home. I was still nursing even when we first started, and it meant that I didn't want to have to ask if I could work from home this day or take off early for a meeting. And so we just never did. On a Friday afternoon, we wanted to be able to like have a beer in the fridge. We like, and not that beer or days off make culture, but it really was just an environment where we could show up as our whole selves, and we didn't feel like we needed to communicate with each other because we needed to know, who was where and when, but we didn't need to sort of answer to each other, and we didn't create inherent hierarchy. And when we started to grow our team, it would have never made any logical sense to hold team members that we were bringing on to some sort of different standard or requirement than how we ourselves wanted to be treated. And fast forward a little bit, I want to share one really specific story. And it was the first time where I really realized how different this was. And it was when we finally had the resources to get a benefits plan for our company. And so that was an exciting day. And so we got the benefits broker, and they had come in, and we're going through all of the things, and we're really pushing hard to be able to get the best plan that we could afford. And at the time, every dollar really, really mattered. And we'd gone through sort of meticulously and being like, okay, well, let's bump up these paramedicals, or let's increase the percentage of drug coverage or whatever, because we're just trying to squeeze the very best plan that we could afford for our team out of this process. And after sort of painstakingly doing this and pushing just a little bit, the right amount past our comfort zone, my comfort zone on that plan, the benefits broker shut the binder, reached down to her bag, and pulled out a different binder. And she said, okay, now let's talk about the executive package. And I didn't even understand what words she was saying. I'm like, sorry? And she was like, well, the executive package. I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, well, normally companies will have the plan that is for their team, and then they'll have a more enriched benefits plan for the executive team. And I still didn't even understand her words, because she had literally just sat through this very painstaking process where we were doing everything in our power to increase the plan to like the highest possible we could give to our team. Because in my mind, like, if I had to have two plans, my team was going to get the better one. Like, why in the world would I build something where it's like, oh, like, and it's like, and now, like, now if you have this title, or now if you do this, now you get something better. It just didn't even make sense to me. And that was probably the first moment that I can point to and say, I realized then that how we approached our team looked different than how many companies approach their team.
Yeah, that I'm so glad you shared that story. That just says everything about you and about Thinkific and the culture that you created. Thank you for that. The process of going for an IPO, at what point in the journey did you guys create the BHAG, the big vision, and begin to talk about this what seems like a very abstract thing for a lot of companies? This, in this side of the world, it's, we see it in Ireland as, oh, that's what you do in London. There's only 5 companies here that are actually listed. In Northern Ireland, only 5 companies that are listed, and it's almost seen as the preserve of those companies that live around the financial district in London, or those companies from Silicon Valley. But at what point did you guys start to socialize the idea of an IPO, and was it enshrined in the vision early?
Yeah, good question. It really wasn't. It certainly wasn't something that we ever talked to the team about, and it was something that we had sort of had the conversation, but always about, a very, very far distant future that, one day, like, we could IPO. But we always had it in our head that we would only IPO if we could hit the $1 billion valuation. That was something that we had sort of said. And as a result of that, based on normal valuations, like, that day could only have been very far in the future. And so we had explored financing, like I said. So we'd taken in a very small amount of financing, really, in the company earlier on. We were predominantly bootstrapped, and we had revenue, and so we grew that way. And it was really sort of a culmination of just like the factors at the time, which was when the pandemic started. We found ourselves to be in a position where we could help, right? I mean, we were a business that helped people create and take their offline businesses online in a time that the world was all shutting down. And thankfully, to be honest, we just felt like we were really in a position to help. And through that, the recognition and desire to invest to grow. And we knew that we had the team, and we knew that we had sort of these, this momentum, and we were in a position where we could now really pour some, fuel on the fire in the ways that we hadn't before. And so when we started that process of, working with bankers and starting to, write the story and look at what this could look like, the market conditions were such that the valuations in the public markets far outpaced the valuations in the private markets. And in, more simple language, that meant that we could raise capital by giving up much less equity if we did that in the public market rather than in the private market. And because those valuations were so wildly outpaced, like, it was a bit, silly. But it meant that even as a fairly young and small company, we had the potential to hit that $1 billion valuation that was always in the back of our mind as, it's only ever worth doing an IPO if you can hit that $1 billion valuation. So it really came together that way. We never in a million years would have thought that we could IPO at that point in our journey. But that's how it came together.
And just again to share with the listeners some context, what were your numbers whenever you were about to IPO? So when you had the bankers around, so revenue, profitability, employee numbers.
Yeah, we were at the beginning of the pandemic, we were 115 employees. At IPO, we were around 300. It's been a while since I looked at those numbers, but it's something like that. But our annual revenue in 2021, when we went public, we were about 35 million. When we went public. So when you compare that to the $1.3 billion valuation on closing day, you can appreciate the multiples and the extent to which that was atypical.
Phenomenal. How profitable were you guys on the $35 million?
We were not. So we were but we weren't burning a ton. I don't remember exactly what it was,
but you weren't even in profitability. For a lot of the listeners, this will just be like they'll not be able to compute.
Tech math and valuation math, it confuses all the business people in the room because it doesn't really make any sense. But nevertheless, that's the game that we're playing in. So that's where we are. Today, Thinkific did hit profitability just in the final quarter of last year, and has hit profitability and is profitable.
Absolutely incredible, Miranda. Just to pivot for a little moment. You've achieved success beyond your kind of wildest imagination. Financial success. You've now got that kind of freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships in terms of kind of creating your own networks now, and very much freedom of purpose. What has that success done? Has it changed things fundamentally for you? You know, especially the amount of money that we're talking about here, and I suppose the accolades that have come with the fact that you've successfully started and scaled and sold a company that achieved unicorn status. How has it changed you?
Yeah, so some good questions, some quick clarity. So lots of people think of an IPO as an exit, and it's really not. In many ways, it's like a continuation of continuing to hold that company. We only sold 17-ish% of the company on the public markets. It's still predominantly privately held. And so it's not quite the same as a sale where you then are putting cash in the bank.
It's still significant.
But no, it is still significant. I'm more just this is my nerdy brain that's very
just get the facts correct.
Let's be really clear. And also, I'm a late co-founder, and that means that I have a smaller equity stake than my peers. But certainly, that doesn't change the fact that this has been like a dramatic impact to me in my life. And so I think for me, as you know, your listeners don't, but I stepped away from the company in February of last year. So basically a year ago, and I've been on sabbatical in that time, and I recognize the extreme privilege that I have in being able to take that time and frankly, to breathe and to just sort of take stock of, where am I and what is the change and what do I want to see in the world from this point forward, and who am I, and all of those things. And I am grateful for so many lessons learned and opportunity to see things through a lens that few people get to see. I feel like I don't have a good soundbite for how to summarize, but I think one of the things that I have been most surprised by and probably still need to digest and integrate, but something that I wish that I could help other people see is honestly just how much of a game it all is. So whether it's, the capital markets and valuations and so on and so forth, but even success and what we're striving for, and the recognition that at the end of the day, what I can point to is, I love the experience of getting to do something exhilarating and fun. And that's but it's all about the journey. It's all about the journey. It's not about the trophy at the end. So many people have asked me, well, what was it like? What was it like on the, the day that you went public? And the truth is the 6 months leading up to the day were insane. I've never worked harder in my life. I was working from 5 a.m. until midnight pretty much every single day. My husband would just bring me food, and I worked very, very hard. And that was a wild journey. But on the day that we actually went public was the first day in 6 months that I didn't have tons of meetings and deliverables. And it was basically, you woke up and that was the day that, I got lots of inbound messages and everybody congratulating. But it was the day where I was like, okay, well, like that was fun. Like now what do I do around here again? Like rechecking in with the team. And in many ways, and not to say that it was disappointing, it wasn't, but it is like, it's actually like you're coming down from the exhilaration of the journey. And I think that a lot of life, we are taught to chase the dream, the goal, the end point. And more than ever, I realized, and deep to my bones, that all that ever matters is the journey and the ride. So I wish that we could all have that feeling and understanding, and maybe it would change just a little bit how we spend our lives and our time, and also give ourselves grace for when we don't hit the trophy that we are striving for, but the journey matters all the same.
Yeah, really profound. It reminds me of Jim Carrey's insight and his wish for everyone to be famous for a day, so that they could understand that it's not what they think it actually is. And so if you're not enjoying the journey, and I'm conscious that people will listen to this and say, well, that's fine for Miranda to say that, she's got her exit, so it's easy to say that now. But I suspect you reflect back very, very fondly of the time that you spent with Greg and the other co-founders, and the team members, and building the team and serving the customers. Rob, our podcast producer, and I were having a conversation before you come on, and he was very praiseworthy of Thinkific. He used it in the early stages of his podcasting career when he created a course and he put it online, and he said, you guys were amazing, the culture was incredible, you had like customer success managers who were helping him step through all of this. And I suspect that's something that you're very proud of. I want to just come to a few things before we move into our close. You've mentioned you're married, you're a wonderful mum to Corbin and Koa. We see in our accelerator program, it's typically 10% of the accelerator program that's represented by females. Sadly, this year we have 22 leaders on our program and we have no females. You're a huge champion, and I have two daughters who enjoy all things entrepreneurialism, and I know you're hugely passionate about female founders and female entrepreneurs. What would you say to females listening here, or trying to balance being a wife, being a mother, and also being this incredible entrepreneur? How do you get all of that? Because my business partner Claire is an amazing lady, and I can't kind of fathom how females can balance all of this. But we'd love to see more females into the entrepreneurial community. So what would you say to the females out there?
Yeah, it's all hard. Parenthood is hard, and having children is hard, and running a company is hard, and all of that is hard. But in my case, and I know that this isn't everybody's case, but in my case, I have an incredible partner without whom none of this would work. My husband is the reason that my children have clean clothes and end up at play dates, and end up at school and all the things. And that's what we've done in our relationship, which I know looks very different than other people, but he is the reason that I've been able to carve the time that I need when I can't be there for my kids, and we thankfully have a relationship where we are both equally the parent, and often actually more times him. But it's really just about getting clear on what's important, and also getting clear on what can slide. am somebody that doesn't like to drop balls, but the recognition is, or the realization is that inevitably, in order to do all the things, you need to get clear on what's on that list of 25 things, what's on your, this is what we're doing list, and this is what we're not doing list, and figure out how to create the time for the things that matter and be okay with letting go of the things that don't. And that might mean that your house is messier than you want it to be, or that you've got somebody who comes in, if you've got the resources so that, somebody is cleaning your house for you, or you get groceries delivered just to save the hour of time that it would have taken you to go pick them up. Or, maybe you call in the birthday party and it's not quite as elaborate as you would have otherwise had it, but you need to figure out what you're willing to let drop, knowing that you can't do everything, but do what matters, and give yourself the grace of letting the other stuff go, and know that that can be okay.
Do what matters. Yeah. So much wisdom in that. And I think I see it with the females close to me, and incredible ladies, from my wife to some of our team members who are striving to get things perfect all of the time. But it's ultimately, again, discerning what matters. And it's okay to let some things drop, some things slide in the context of a bigger picture here. So, something we were chatting about off air that I'd love to speak about before we close, which is your recent autism diagnosis. And I interviewed James Watt, who closed last season's podcast, the founder of Brewdog, who was diagnosed a number of years ago. And we were speaking about this because I see this as a superpower. My own daughter Anya has high functioning autism. She just inspires me every day, and I'm finding more and more people who have either found a diagnosis for themselves, or who have, it seems that every 1 in 4 or 5 families have a child with autism, and they're challenged with that child, and in terms of the energy that child has. And it's kind of, I always felt that if you could direct that energy towards something that serves others, it's just an absolute superpower. How do you feel about it now? Is it something that you're inspired to do more with in terms of serving the autism community? How has it helped you?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. I was reflecting the other day. As I mentioned, I've been on sabbatical for a year, and I was reflecting to somebody the other day that I think I've just been overachieving at self-work this year because I didn't have something else to overachieve at. So it's like, if there is an inner child, like, I've met all the inner children, I've tackled all of the shadows, I've got the therapist, I've got the new autism diagnosis. I came out as queer, like, I'm like all the things. I'm like, let's just get it all really clear. And so for me, the autism diagnosis was a funny one because I kept coming up with these threads I couldn't quite reconcile about myself, and I had evaluated myself for autism. Clearly, I am the expert, and determined that I couldn't possibly meet the criteria. You'll actually think this maybe is funny. It was because autism diagnosis requires both sides. One is the social communication side, which I've always known that I've struggled with. I can't read people one-on-one, and I do a really good job masking and compensating. But the other side is restricted interests. And repetitive behavior, but restricted interest. And I was like, I don't have any restricted interest. Like, this is completely ridiculous. But of course, like, it's like, no, like small business is my restricted interest. I cannot carry a conversation about anything that is not business related, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I was sure that I didn't have autism, but it kept coming up and I was frustrated. And so I eventually engaged a professional to rule out autism. And they instead confirmed that I fully and completely meet the diagnostic criteria, which of course I do. And I now see very black and white. But that has been, certainly something that I need to wrap my head around, both for all of the gifts that actually has given me. And when I think about, I don't love labels. I don't love, the idea of labels. And I also know that I'm only who I am because everything transpired exactly as it did up until now. And so I don't wish that I was diagnosed earlier, etc. But certainly things in my life were harder than they needed to be because I didn't fully understand how I work. And so now I've got the grace of that. And I can see so many of, how my autism has actually helped me to, as a superpower, as you said, to be who I am. And I do intend to talk more. I have not yet, but I do intend to talk more publicly about that, and how do we leverage that, and how do we approach this from a strengths-based position as opposed to like a deficits-based position, and also in particular with females. So we know that autism is extremely underdiagnosed in women, and especially anyone that did well in school. So I never would have been diagnosed in the school system because I was female and because I did school well, never mind that I didn't do social communication well and couldn't carry on a conversation about anything other than technology and then small business, which nobody was interested in when I was 16. So nevertheless, that's where I'm at. But I think that whether it's a diagnosis like this or other kinds of self-work, the more that we can get curious about ourselves, learn more about ourselves, be growth-minded, be self-aware, and continue to evolve, that's all we can hope to do. Taking it all the way back to business, I often will tell people that as leaders, especially at the top of our business, we need to grow personally at or ahead of the rate of growth of our business in order to just stand still. And so that requires us to constantly be checking in against our own biases and unconscious biases, and where do we need to learn and grow, and what is not working, so we can continue to evolve and adapt so that we can serve not just ourselves and our families, but also to lead.
Oh my goodness. There's another podcast just going deep on psyche alone, and regular listeners of the podcast will know I love that topic. We talk about the psyche, the very first principle of our ScaleX framework being the multiplier or the divisor in terms of the efficacy of all of the other 9 principles. It either empowers or impedes, and again, what you're saying resonates so strongly in terms of, ultimately you scale a business from the inside out. Now that can be quite challenging for leaders coming to this for the first time to understand, but you have articulated it beautifully. And I really hope you continue to explore your role in the context of supporting females, but especially those with autism, what you've shared. And again, characteristic young autistic girls mask, and they mask very well. So
extremely well.
Yeah. And I suspect there's a number of listeners to the podcast who maybe are discerning for the first time themselves that maybe there's something to explore here for me or for one of their kids. And you're a wonderful role model. Your story is so inspiring, Miranda, in so many different ways. To bring this to a close, I have a closing tradition, and I have the absolute privilege of speaking with amazing people who have enjoyed so many experiences in life and in business. Could you share with our audience 3 of your timeless takeaways?
Yeah. The first is, we talked about drum beats and rhythms, and part of that needs to be feedback loops, and we need to do that inside and outside of our company. And so really quickly, we understand feedback loops with customers, which is, we ask for feedback and then we listen to what they say needs to be fixed, whatever. But we also need to build those feedback loops with our team. We talked before about culture. A really simple way to do that is something like a quarterly employee engagement survey. But what you're looking for is not the number of how they would say the likelihood to refer you is. What you just want is the open-ended feedback. You need to ask your team on an ongoing, regular rhythm that you don't need to think about. What should we start, stop, keep doing? So what should we start doing? what should we stop doing, and what should we keep doing? What is working well in our organization? Tell us so that we don't accidentally break it. Create those feedback loops inside your team. Number two, a little bit of what we just said is it's all mindset. We need to grow personally and professionally at or ahead of the pace of growth of our company in order to just stand still. And that is different for our teams, because when we bring in a marketing manager, we can later on bring in a marketing director, and we can later on bring in a marketing VP, and so on. But if we are at the top of our company and we don't want to bring in somebody above us, which we can do, but is not generally the idea, then we need to run just to stand still. And the third is progress, not perfection. The goal is not to get it right 100% of the time. It's just to get directionally correct. Be less wrong. Just move directionally correctly, where we think we should go. And the combination of forward motion and just trying to get it more right than wrong will ensure that we get to where we're going.
Oh, sage advice, Miranda. Brilliant. I know you mentioned you've been on a sabbatical, but what's next for you?
Yeah, good question. I'm still trying to figure that out. I keep making napkin business plans that are in a totally different field that I need to reconcile in my head. So I might end up doing both, which is helping people scale, because I do want to do that, and I'm figuring out what that looks like next. And maybe I'll build a side hustle on the side doing something else entirely. But we'll see. Ask me in 6 months. I expect to start to take action here in the next couple of months.
Yeah, well, I'm detecting lots of wonderful energy, so I've no doubt there'll be something looming very, very soon. If people want to find out a little bit more, Miranda, about you, about your story, which I have no doubt they will, where best to connect with you?
Yeah, MirandaLievers.com is my site, and I post on Instagram if I do create content. So I'd love to hear from folks. I love having great conversations with founders, and I have been interviewing folks. So if you are on a scaling journey and want to chat about your story, I'd love to hear it. But MirandaLievers.com, you can email me through there or connect on Instagram.
Miranda, thank you. This has just been a wonderful conversation today. I really want to thank you for your time, your wonderful energy. I really enjoyed speaking with you, listening to you in Croatia, and you've delivered so much value today. So I wish you every success. Look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Cheers.